Your personal information is being sold online right now, not by hackers, but by data brokers, companies you've never heard of that collect your personal information and sell it. There are hundreds of these sites gathering your phone number, home address, your relatives' information, even your browsing activity, and once your data is out there, it spreads fast. That's why scam calls know your name. It's how strangers can look you up in seconds. And trying to remove your data yourself can take hours per site, with no guarantee it stays gone. Aura does it for you. They automatically find your information and send removal requests to over 200 data broker sites, then keep monitoring to make sure it stays gone, because your data can be relisted at any time. With Aura, you can even see where and when your data was found and removed. The longer your data stays out there, the more it spreads. Try Aura for free at aura.com/hidden. That's aura.com/hidden to try Aura for free.
Doogie.
Sam.
Last month, we crafted our Premier League Player of the Year shortlists. This month, let's talk Manager of the Year, because there are several very intriguing candidates.
He's manager of the season for me.
Regis
Bris had the best season out of every manager.
I think what he's done is phenomenal. The same goes for Keith Andrews, by the way.
I think Mikel Arteta deserves to get the award for this season.
Pep Guardiola should definitely be the Premier League Manager of the Year. Yes, he has the financial backing, but he has out-tacted all his opponents. When coming up against league leaders Arsenal both times, City found new ways to nullify what Arsenal do best.
He's one of the best managers in the Premier League because he can adapt, there's no excuses, and he's not afraid to do things that are against the grain.
Keith Andrews has to be Manager of the Year.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome to another episode of The Truth. I am your host, Sam Tighe. Joining me from afar is Doogie Critchley. Hello.
Hello. Yes, train strikes in London this week, so we were unable to film in person. But great to be back with you, a slightly injured Sam Tighe.
Yeah, combination of train strikes, tube strikes, and a small injury to my big toe. But I'll be okay in a couple of weeks. Trust me. Don't worry about that.
Crunching challenge gone wrong.
Yeah, I was crunched.
The recipient, yeah.
I was the recipient, yeah, but it'll all be okay. Don't you worry. And lurking on the record, it doesn't get an evil introduction this week because, quite honestly, I was too sad to craft one after my injury. So what I've decided to do is compare him to the saddest thing that I can think of, which is people who order a salad at a restaurant. So hello to our producer, this podcast's side salad, if you will, Jack Collins.
Hello, how are you doing? All good?
Jack has a soundboard. This is bad news. Lovely stuff. Is that taken straight from your stag or from your wedding?
That is taken directly from my stag. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. I've got a voice again. This is nice. It's good to be back with you both. I'm excited about this.
I enjoyed muzzled Jack more than I enjoy loud Jack. I'm not going to lie, but I do recognise that jingle. I think I was part of that crowd singing. So good stuff. Really nice to hear it. Look, great success for Aston Villa in the Truth Derby last weekend. Just about, Doogie. That was a pretty wild 60 seconds there. I told you that we need 3 points, please, no fewer, and we took it to the wire.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think it was one of the games of the season. Obviously pretty gutting from a Sunderland perspective. I think Villa were the better side throughout, to be honest. I don't think both sides defended particularly well, but your individual quality was definitely showing. But 2 goals and a minute late on, and Sunderland had a great opportunity to draw the game and then had a fantastic opportunity to win the game through Habib Diarra, who went for the chip 2-on-1. Well, I mean, Talby was there, but he was slightly outside of his eye line, but he was 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper. He goes for the chip. And I was saying in a few WhatsApp groups, like with Panenkas, I really don't like chips when you're 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper. I think it just carries so much more risk. And if he had slotted it away like Isidora did a few minutes earlier, then we'd have snatched a famous win at Villa Park. As it was, you guys then went up the other end, scored through Luca Dean, crossing in the ball to Tammy Abraham, who got a minor touch. But it was absolutely gutting. But I've got to take the positives, really. We pushed a club that will finish in all likelihood in the Champions League. Spots very close. And yeah, scored 3 goals at Villa Park and had an opportunity for 4. So yeah, it was the best Truth Derby, at least by far this season.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to touch on something there because what was quite interesting to me was throughout the game. So for those of you in the UK, if you had Sky Sports commentary, the commentator kept talking about how Sunderland, if they were to win this game, right in the thick of the European charge, right on the cusp of something really special, as if they haven't already done something special by staying up first and foremost. But then I didn't feel like the fan reaction to the late loss really reflected that. Like when I spoke to you about it, you were sort of like, oh, what a game that was. And a lot of the Sunderland social media staff and a lot of the podcast clips that I've seen have all just been like, wow, that was great. What a game. Which is not the way you react if you've just had your kind of European dream snatched from you in cruel circumstances, which leads me to believe that not many of you particularly believed in this European dream to begin with, and the commentator may have been drumming up the slightly exaggerated narrative. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's partly because it's not over yet and there are still 5 games to go. Sunderland have quite a difficult run in. We've got to play Man United and, well, I was going to say Chelsea, but it doesn't seem like a particularly difficult game at the moment. But yeah, there's still plenty to play for. I think it was just a sort of reflection of the fact that we kind of would have been fairly lucky to win that game. We had an amazing final 10 minutes, but prior to that, I think we're slightly drifting in it. And, pushed a very good Aston Villa side that, look all but secure for Champions League football. Very, very close indeed. So I've had mixed emotions about the European push in inverted commas for weeks, but I did decide last week that I was actually fully behind it. I kind of...
Just in time for it to fall to pieces, yeah?
Well, exactly. It kind of came quite late to me, but I just always wanted to see my side in Europe, and you just don't know whether that's ever going to happen again. You really don't know, Spurs, Forest, West Ham might be a lot better next year. There might be, clubs like Chelsea might be improved next year. Maybe Bournemouth, have another great season under Marco Rosa. You just can't script your great trajectory or your planned trajectory. Newcastle as well, another example of a club that you'd expect to bounce back next year. So I really wanted it. I don't think it's over yet, but I did just thoroughly enjoy the game. It was fun.
It was good fun. It was like probably the best relatively unconsequential game of the Premier League, because the Sunday 2 p.m. slot is very busy these days. And for those of you that don't know, it's just because of the sheer amount of clubs that end up in Europe for the Premier League these days. Anyone that plays on a Thursday basically has to play on a Sunday or later. And at this stage of the season, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa and Crystal Palace are all still on Thursday duties, which is quite some achievement. So it means that a lot of that stuff gets lost. I'm also quietly convinced no one watches Aston Villa because it's never the most interesting game Sunday 2 p.m. There's always something going on. Like even this time around, there was a Merseyside derby, and last week or the week before there was Tottenham hosting Forest in that bizarre 3-0 defeat. So a lot gets lost there, and this game won't go down, I don't think, in people's memories. But it's a shame because it probably deserved to. This weekend, another truth derby. We're chaining them together. Villa take on Fulham. Jack, just bring you in quickly. One final favour, please. Just go ahead and seal the Champions League for us, done and dusted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very likely, if I put it that way, Sam, this Fulham team firmly on the beach. And whilst, you can talk about the best game of the weekend in the Premier League that took place between Aston Villa and Sunderland, I was privy to the worst game that happened in the Premier League this weekend, which was Brentford and Fulham trying to decide who was more rubbish. There is a genuine argument at this point, I think, that even the fact that Chelsea, Fulham and Brentford are all kind of within a couple of points each other, in the European challenging spots in the Premier League, the best side in West London might be QPR, and they're like 11th in the Championship and lost yesterday to 2-1 to Swansea. Like, it really is one of those kind of very strange coincidences. I don't think you'll have much bother with Fulham this weekend. I mean, look, pulling kind of random results out of nowhere is a little bit the Fulham way in some regards, but I've seen absolutely nothing in the previous 4 or 5 weeks to suggest that Fulham have absolutely any chance of getting anything against Aston Villa this weekend.
That would be grand, yeah. And speaking of Chelsea there, 5 losses in a row. We're recording Wednesday afternoon, so just obviously watched Chelsea trounced, and I really do mean trounced, by Brighton. We're talking Manager of the Year candidates today. Liam Rosenior definitely won't be featuring in today's topic or anyone's top 5, or if he does, the podcast will be swiftly cancelled. But, with Brighton leapfrogging them into 6th, maybe Fabian Hürzeler will, I guess. We're about to find out, because let's do it, Diggy. Let's rank our Premier League Manager of the Year candidates. You're going to lead the way on the ranking, just like we did so on the player side last month. So you've got your 5-1. I've also got my own, and we'll just kind of compare as we go. Before you dig in at number 5, just a quick note on the recent history of this award, because it's worth considering when you decide your own top 5s. The last 8 editions have all been won by Liverpool or Man City managers, which means Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola shared 7 between them, and Arne Slot won 1. You have to go as far back as 2013-14 to find a manager who did not win the Premier League get this award, and that was Tony Pulis and his miracle save job on Crystal Palace, who'd lost their first 7 games in a row and then somehow finished 11th. So what I'm trying to say there is, for a manager not to win the Premier League, but to win this award, it takes a hell of a lot. And I haven't let that influence my top 5, but I will be interested to see if that has influenced Doogie's, and of course yours at home as well. So Doogie, take us away at number 5, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you make a very, very good point there, because as you point out, it hasn't been done since 2013-14, a side not winning, or a manager that didn't win the league winning the Manager of the Year award. And it's only happened 5 times in 25 or the last 25 Premier League seasons. Those examples, just quickly, were George Burley with Ipswich in 2001 when they finished 5th, Harry Redknapp with Spurs in 2010 when they finished 4th, Alan Pardew for that year where Newcastle finished 5th, and then he got, I think it was an 8-year contract on the back of that. The Pulis year, and then Jurgen Klopp in 21-22 when Liverpool finished 2nd but won the League Cup and the FA Cup.
Yeah, I've made a small mistake there then. Have I?
Oh, don't worry. And that's the year that they also reached the Champions League final. They were on for a quadruple, ended up with 2 trophies. It was still a decent year.
There you go.
In my opinion, Manager of the Year should go to a manager that overperforms the most given the resources available to them. And that might be a little bit of a spoiler for what's to come. But I do have some honourable mentions as well, which we might dot in throughout the episode. But in 5th, I've gone with Andoni Iraola. Now, he's obviously nearing the end of his time at Bournemouth. He's done 3 seasons there. He's finished 12th, 9th, and they're currently 9th as well. But they are level on points with 7th place Chelsea. And I think it's really the context of last summer that makes me really want to give him some credit here today, because they lost Zabarnyi, Dean Howson, Kirkes, Ouattara in the summer. Then in January, they lose Antoine Semenyo, who for large parts of the first half of the season was looking like the kind of favourite maybe for Player of the Year, definitely in the discussion. He scored 10 goals in 20 games up to leaving. He is still their joint top scorer in the league with Eli Junior Krupi, who has played around 1,350 minutes. He's definitely been kind of eased in to Iraola, to Bournemouth, to Premier League life as well. They have made a profit of £113 million on transfers this season. Only Monaco with 117 million in terms of net profit have made more in the entirety of world football. So they lost a number of stars. So to replicate their success and even having a chance to go further in terms of placing of last year, I think is really, really impressive. They are currently on a 13-match unbeaten run. There are 7 draws in there, but 6 wins. They've beaten Liverpool, Everton, Arsenal, and Newcastle in that run. And 4 of their final 5 games are against sides ranked 12th or below, with Man City thrown in there too. So Arsenal will be hoping that they can replicate what happened at the Emirates a couple of weeks ago and put a further cat amongst the pigeons in this Premier League title race. But they've got a great opportunity to finish exceedingly high up the table for a side that lost so many stars last year. And I think Andoni Iraola deserves a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely. I actually have him a touch higher for what it's worth. I'm a big believer in trying to grade these managers in terms of what they've achieved versus what they have to work with. I think that is the fairest way to do it. And Iraola has achieved, minor miracles considering all of the context you laid out, losing 4/5 of the defensive unit last summer. You didn't mention that obviously Kepa went back on from his loan to Chelsea, so they had to sign a new goalkeeper as well as most of a new defensive line. They also rolled into the season. I remember the opener against Liverpool at Anfield that Liverpool kind of squeaked a win out at the end. Bournemouth were the better team, and they did it. So without really a functioning midfield, they had Marcus Tavernier in holding midfield because they just had so many injuries to open up the campaign. And what Iraola's done in lieu of losing those stars, and obviously Semenyo added to the mix in January, is incredible. And I think the coaching job that he's done with James Hill in central defence, remarkable. Alex Scott is becoming a superstar, and his handling of Junior Krupi, talented as he is, has been pretty masterful, I would say, in terms of a young player exposure and the way he's used him in certain games. Really, really good. So huge fan of what Iraola has done here. A question for producer Jack here to come in, though. Obviously, Bournemouth are like right in this little cluster of five or so teams, maybe 3 teams that are in the mix, right? They're kind of in the mix for this European crowd, and it's Bournemouth in there, and it's so Iraola's getting the credit. David Moyes and Everton are in there. Marco Silva and Fulham are in there, and I just wondered from a Fulham perspective, or from a club perspective where Marco Silva's the manager, and you see Iraola and probably Moyes getting so much credit, and Silva not so much. Do you kind of understand that, Jack, because of what Iraola has had to battle against, or does it not quite sit right with you sometimes?
No, look, obviously there's also an element of kind of new kids on the block, I think, with Iraola. And I know he's been around for a little while now, but Marco Silva is kind of one of those names that's been in and around Championship, Premier League for, the best part of a decade, right? Like it's been a while where he's been in the conversation. And also I think that the problem with this is, and sometimes kind of style is king, right? Iraola's Bournemouth are incredibly joyful to watch. And there have been spells, I think, last season and the season before, I think that there was a little bit of frustration that Marco Silva wasn't getting some of the credit that he deserved. This season, there's a weird sort of apathy around Fulham. Obviously, part of that is due to the fact that his contract is up in the summer and there's still been kind of no decisions. You look at Iraola and he's like, right, okay, cool, let's let the club get on with it. I'm going to be leaving. Marco Rosa all but appointed now as their new manager. There's almost a kind of huge begrudging respect, I think, about that at Fulham. He's like, he's just made a decision. He's got on with it and everyone can kind of move on. Marco Silva has done an absolutely unbelievable job over 5 seasons at Fulham. The first absolutely storming the Championship, and then 4 seasons of relatively comfortable security in the Premier League with a couple of cup runs thrown in there, etc. I think this year Fulham have been harder to identify in terms of an actual identity, and therefore it's more difficult to kind of give him credit. There's been less kind of sustained runs of form that would put him in conversations for even manager of the month rather than manager of the year. So I don't kind of begrudge it whatsoever. I also think that Bournemouth have hit their stride at the right time and are far more likely than we are at this point to end up in a European spot, which would be a big harbinger of this. And I think also, Fulham have effectively fallen short a little bit at the end of campaigns in terms of being in the conversation for Europe and falling away, one year after another. I did a piece on this on Fulhamish recently about the fact that this is kind of part of the Marco Silva DNA. You start relatively fast, you finish relatively slow, but it doesn't really matter because you've done more than enough to pull yourselves away from danger. That's not something that grabs headlines in the same kind of way. So no, and also I think this season, when you look at what Iraola has done with the team and all of those losses in the summer that you've already referenced, compared to what Marco Silva has done, I think they're chalk and cheese in terms of that. And that's not to disparage Silva as a manager. I still think he's a wonderful coach. I still think that there is a chance that he gets a move to, say, a Newcastle and ends up doing a very, very good job at a team with a little bit more resource than what Fulham have. But I don't think that he should be in these conversations, no.
Good. All right. Just wanted a sense check there because obviously everyone goes mad for Iraola, and I think the traditional crowd as well. They go pretty mad for what David Moyes has done this season at Everton. And I do wonder sometimes when you look at the clubs in the table and how close they are and how close they have been for most of the campaign. Are the differentiators clear enough? And am I getting swept up in the Iraola hype? Because he is still a bit exciting and fresh, isn't he? To the point where he's leaving soon. And I feel like I barely got to know him, despite knowing him very well. But anyway, Diggy, take us on to number 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth mentioning David Moyes was one of my honourable mentions as well. They're on track for 54 points. That's their best since 2021.
But was Marco Silva one of your honourable mentions?
He actually wasn't. There you go.
So you hate Fulham. Got it.
Yeah. And neither was Fabian Herzler, which now looks a little bit silly given the fact that they are the side that are 6th. They're only 5 points off 5th place Liverpool. Daniel Farke, I think, deserves a shout out as well ahead of an FA Cup semi-final this weekend. They've only lost 4 of their last 19 games. And then he just simply hasn't been a manager in the Premier League for long enough this season. But Michael Carrick's also done a pretty excellent job at Man United. I do think the results maybe slightly flatter them on the basis of their performances in the last 5 weeks, maybe, but those were my honourable mentions. But anyway, let's go to number 4. And this is a manager that I think you can actually probably make a case that he should be maybe slightly higher, but then I was going to get into real issues with the title contenders. I've gone with Unai Emery. Aston Villa are 4th in the league, but they are level on points with Man United. They are 8 points clear of 6th as it stands. They're all but guaranteed Champions League football because that 5th place is confirmed for Champions League. Only Arsenal and Man City have won more than their 17 league games. They did go on a pretty difficult run in terms of wins in the middle part of the season, 3-12, but they've now won 2 of their last 3. And they've had challenges to contend with this season too. They're obviously playing in the Europa League where they have been close to faultless. They've won 11 of 12 games, only 1 defeat to Go Ahead Eagles, which now seems like a long time ago now as they ease past Bologna in the quarterfinals. They're playing Nottingham Forest in the semi-finals, who are 12 places and 22 points below them. And they've won 4 of their 8 matches against Forest since they were promoted, only losing 2. So they feel like a really, really good bet to make a Europa League final. And he's had to contend with massive injuries in one key area of the pitch as well. In particular, central midfield, Yuri Tielemans, Boubacar Kamara, missing for weeks as well. Pau Torres has only been fit to start 16 league games as well. Ollie Watkins' form completely evaporated in the middle part of the season when he scored 3 in 17. He now looks back to his best, but it was a really difficult season for him for long stretches of it. And then you look at their signings last summer, due to PSR issues, financial fair play issues, they haven't really been able to use Harvey Elliott. Evan Gessa then got loaned to Crystal Palace in January. Daniel Marlon left for Roma in January as well. They had to bring in Tammy Abraham quite late in the window. It's not been a particularly easy set of circumstances for Unai Emery to operate in. And despite all that, I think they're a pretty good bet for 3rd with the way Man United are playing right now. Pretty lucky to beat Chelsea at the weekend, lost to Leeds last week. Aston Villa, of course, could have lost to Sunderland, but as I said in the intro to this podcast, I think that would have slightly flattered Sunderland on the basis of how that game went. So Unai Emery has done another exceptional job, and maybe I had him too low at 4.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, I've again, same with Ariola. I've got him a smidge higher than you. I've got him in 3rd. And just to put a fine point on some of the points you raised, last summer's transfer window was genuinely traumatic for the club. It was awful. Really bad atmosphere. Obviously bled into the season where it took them 5 attempts to score a goal and win even get a point, let alone win a game. A situation that probably would have sunk half the clubs and half the managers in the league, to be clear. But Emery recovered and won 11 in a row following that, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then just as things started to look golden, 10-point buffer on, 4th place, really secure in that 3rd place. All the midfielders got injured at the same time. Kamara, who's Villa's best player, out for the season in January. Tielemans out for 2 months, and McGinn had knee surgery and missed 6 weeks, all in the space of 2 weeks that happened. And because of the financial restrictions that Villa are operating under with the UEFA settlement, they could not do what, say, Man City did, which is react to a couple of injuries by spending 90 million on 2 wonderful, wonderful players. They had to barter for a Douglas Luiz loan who hadn't played for 18 months. So these are really tricky scenarios to work from. And Villa look like they're going to finish, if not 4th, then maybe 3rd. And in doing so, they'll have overcome quite a lot of issues that have outperformed a series of clubs that are operating with a significantly higher wage bill. Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool are all 50 to 70 million pound higher, according to some of the latest figures a year in terms of wage bill. And they'll do it by, I think, turning a transfer profit for the whole season and having slashed the wage bill by, I genuinely think, about £500,000 a week. So to do all of that under those restrictions, it is pretty special. Albeit I will say that it has happened in a season where quite a lot of the big dogs really haven't managed to pull themselves together and perform properly. So you always have to take advantage of those fallow periods. You do have to work that in as a bit of a caveat. But well done to Villa for effectively just holding strong and doing what needs to be done, because it looks like it's going to be 2 seasons of Champions League football out of 3, which is it's just huge. It's absolutely huge. And it will be the 4th season in a row that Villa have finished above Spurs. It will be the 3rd season in 4 that Villa have finished above Chelsea. And they're not operating on the same financial plane. They would if they could, but they can't. So a lot of credit here goes to the manager, like a hell of a lot.
I like it. I think that's a very fair. I mean, as you say all that, maybe I should have had them in 3rd, but in 3rd I've got. Sorry,
maybe first.
Maybe first. No, I'm pretty sure in my 1st place actually, but my 2nd and 3rd is a little bit tighter. Basically, in 3rd I've slightly cheated and I've gone with whoever wins the league. I think should be the 3rd best manager.
What is this? We need VAR on this rank. It's not a ranking if you just.
I know. So basically, I would then bump down Arteta or Guardiola if they don't win the league to 4th, and then everyone drops down a level. Basically, my thinking is that neither Arteta or Guardiola, short of going well, if Guardiola's Man City go 6 games from 6 to finish the season, then maybe he's got an argument to win it, but. On Arteta, first of all, hasn't won anything yet. They were on for a quadruple on the 22nd of March. They've lost 4 of their last 6 games in all competitions. Lost to Man City, obviously, in the Carabao Cup final, Southampton in the FA Cup. They are through to the semi-finals against Atletico Madrid, but as every week progresses and the side looks increasingly tired, although they did play very well, I thought, in large stretches against Man City, I think that tie looks really, really difficult for Arsenal. I really, really do. They are looking to avoid finishing 2nd for a 4th consecutive season. And after the money invested in that side, it's getting to the stage where there will be questions asked of Arteta if they end this season trophyless, whether that's fair or not, whether Arsenal could actually find a replacement that improves them. Then Arteta would next year is another question as well. But I don't think if they finish trophyless that he can be any higher than 3rd. And even if they win the league, I think they've struggled for large patches of this campaign. It's not been a particularly dominant Premier League title win, and I think there are managers that I'll come to in due course that deserve it more. As for Pep Guardiola, even if they win the league, I'd still have them 3rd. They're on track for 79 points this season. That is 8 more than last campaign, but it's their 3rd worst tally since he took over. They've only got 1 more. That would only be 1 more point than they finished with in his 1st season when they finished 3rd. They have won the Carabao Cup. Very impressive. They are through to the FA Cup semi-finals against Southampton, and with the form of Chelsea, they are strong favourites for that competition. But their Champions League campaign wasn't particularly impressive. And as you just mentioned in that Unai Emery section, they had the advantage of signing Marc Guéhi and Antoine Semenyo in January. And look, I think a lot of Pep's work this year has been really impressive. I think Matheus Nunes has taken massive steps as a right back. I think Nico O'Reilly has clearly been an absolute revelation at left back. The way that Ryan Cherki's grown into this season, I'm sure Pep is having a lot of quiet words behind the scenes there. It's not even necessarily been Erling Haaland's best campaign. Rodri's been coming back from an ACL injury. Gavardio's been injured since January. He deserves a lot of credit. But for me, neither of these managers, even if they win the league, deserve Manager of the Year.
If Arteta turns this around and Arsenal go on and win the league from here, surely that's a major achievement in terms of coaching, because this team looks like it's out on its feet. If he can somehow, eke out the wins and the goals perhaps that they need to go on and win the title, I think that would turn the perspective around a little bit. And look, I'm not necessarily saying that will happen. I actually don't think either of these teams are going to win out from here to the end of the season. But I do think that if Arteta manages to kind of pull this back in, get it back on the rails when it looks like the cart is about to tip over, that's an incredible achievement from a managerial perspective, considering he looks like he's got a load of players kind of who have no capacity to run anymore.
Yeah, I think maybe I was a bit harsh when I said if Arsenal win the league, then maybe Arteta does deserve to be higher up on this ranking. But what I'm judging right now on, the 22nd of April, I wouldn't have either of these two as necessarily the top 2 candidates for this award as it stands. I just don't know whether you can give it to Arteta at the moment or say he's the favourite. And the same goes for Pep, in my thinking at least.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good point raised by Jack there, because it does tap into one of the difficulties we have with these kind of things, which is I really don't like it when we work backwards from a result when it comes to handing out awards. So like, as we talked about in the player of the season discussion, it's not necessarily that if Arsenal win the title, then Declan Rice should win the player of the year. And if City win the title, that's not how it should work. That is a failure of logic. And from this perspective as well, we are judging it based on something that hasn't quite concluded yet, so it is quite difficult. But you can't just shove manager X up the ranking if their team does the business. However, if Arteta does actually manage to haul Arsenal back out of this hole, that does change perspectives. That does change your gauge on things, because they've had an absolutely shocking month, which part of it is down to him, of course, it has to be, but. If it would be quite the feat if they managed to pull this out. However, neither of these two cases are really speaking to me in a top 3 sense, Doogie. I put Arteta in 5th.
Okay.
And I did not put Guardiola in my top 5 whatsoever.
Wow.
I must say they have spent a good half of this season, Manchester City, looking like a team that doesn't really understand what the hell it's supposed to be doing half the time. Caught between two styles, you might say, trying to transition towards the new meta of the Premier League and getting there eventually, but really struggling to begin with. Questions over lack of usage for Ryan Cherki. I think there's been a big portion of the season where they've looked very frail, very untrustworthy, defensively very dodgy. And if you're able to go ahead and just spend money in January to fix your problems, and you can go and sign Semenyo for 62.5 million and Gay for 20, put them on big wages and just plug them in, that's great. But that is not the kind of advantage that most of the other managers that we are talking about and have talked about so far have the luxury of taking advantage of. It's just not possible. And I think Pep will look back at the season, whether or not he wins the league, and I think he'll probably, if he was to rank his own seasons in management, this is right towards the bottom for him. Like, this has not been vintage Pep whatsoever, despite the fact that he has the highest wage bill in the league, every advantage possible, and the best striker in the league. If we're comparing these managers, what they achieve versus the resources at their disposal, not one part of this City season is screaming to me that it's best in class relative to what he's able to call upon. I'll give him credit for producing a stunning player in Nico O'Reilly, and then bringing Kuzanov up to the point where he is now just very, very good. The rest of it, I'm not taken by. I really am not.
Fair enough. I mean, I thought you were going to hammer me for having them that low.
No. So yeah, I mean, I've got Arteta 5th and Pep not in the top 5 at all. Like these guys.
Who did you have a 4th?
So 5 is Arteta, 4 is Areola, and 3 is Emery.
Okay, so we're both into our top 2.
Correct.
Oh gosh, it'd be interesting if we got the same ones. Okay, I think I might be accused of bias, but I've got Regis. I've got Regis Bris in 2nd. I think it's a phenomenal season. Yes, it's slightly. I don't think petered out is a fair description of it, but it's in November we were 4th. We're obviously now 11th. We're still in touching distance of European football, but I think it's quite unlikely. But either way, so much credit. Sunderland finished 4th in the Championship last year. They were 24 points off Leeds and Burnley. They were as close to 17th place Oxford United as they were to the table toppers. They only got promoted in the last minute of a game that Sheffield United played pretty well in and kind of dominated for large stretches of that playoff final last May. They are 2 points off 7th place Chelsea as it stands in late April. That is absolutely ridiculous. They are on track for 52 points. There are only 6 sides in Premier League history that have ever accrued more points as a newly promoted side than the 52 that Sunderland are on track for. And let's see how many they finish up with. But as it stands, pretty special season. The last time anyone got more than that as a newly promoted side was Leeds in 2020-2021 when they set the record with 59 points, which was that amazing Bielsa campaign. But Sunderland have beaten Brentford, no easy feat this season, as many sides have discovered, Chelsea, Bournemouth, Newcastle home and away. They have taken points off Villa at home, Arsenal at home, Everton, Liverpool and Man City, and only Arsenal, City, Palace, Everton and Brighton have conceded fewer than their 40 goals. And this is it might just seem like people have kind of forgotten, because Sunderland have been outside of the Premier League for so long, that, maybe they should finish around 12th to 8th. That's kind of Sunderland's area. It's really not. Sunderland have finished in the top 10 3 times this century. Prior to this century, you have to go back to 1963 for a top 10 finish in the top flight. This is not a club that have a reputation and a history. It's a big club for sure. I'm not doing them down, or not doing ourselves down, but we don't have a reputation for necessarily top 10 finishes and upsetting the big boys to the extent we have this year. I think it has been an amazing feat of management to blend 15 new arrivals. The vast majority, aside from maybe Simon Adingra, that's pretty much it in terms of flop signings. Get all these new characters with various levels of experience and expectations on how much game time they're going to play. Allow the players that got us up from the championships to still play a role as well. And to weather this all together into a side that are currently 11th, I think it's a phenomenal feat of management. So that is why I have my very own Regis Bris into.
Absolutely. I've got him in second as well. Regis Bris understood the assignment completely in a way that clearly newly promoted managers over the last 2 campaigns did not, in a way that I would argue Daniel Farke did not for the first 10 weeks of this season, and in a way that Burnley just never really had a chance of doing so anyway. But look, Bris benefited from some great recruitment. So the guys above him, they take some of his credit because they understood what kind of squad needs to be built in order to try and survive in this current context of the Premier League. And with all 3 promoted clubs going down 2 years in a row, I was just waiting for somebody to go ahead and show me that they understood the physical, transitional nature of the league. The fact that if you came up and tried to play real, genuine football, you are going back down with 17 points. Sunderland did not make any of these mistakes. And to add to your list of achievements there, they managed to negotiate a period in which quite a lot of the players departed for AFCON over the winter period and didn't really drop that many points as a result. Doogie spent 3 months warning us all that Sunderland need to get off to a good start because all the players were going into really tough fixtures in December and it's going to be really tough. And they were fine. They were absolutely fine. Yeah, the setup of the team was great. Granit Xhaka has been absolutely stunningly good. Like he's a signing of the season candidate. Maybe if we wanted to do a podcast on that, but really just the approach. A massive well done to Bris. And okay, people might say, well, they spent over 100 million. They spent, I think you spent
well over 100 million.
You did set a record for.
We did, yeah.
But yeah, you literally have to. Like, you just don't have a choice. And it's still, again, according to some the figures that are floating around that are leaked, not confirmed, but apparently it's still the 17th biggest wage bill in the league. So you may have gone heavy on the transfer spend, but again, the real barometer here is often the wage bill. How much are you paying these players? And Sunderland are still in the bottom quarter of the league for that. Just a big well done. I mean, I figured that you were building a side that looked capable of hitting the right notes in the Premier League, but to just be so clear, so easily, for it to be so smooth is amazing. And of course, the manager that keeps everybody on an even keel, he deserves the credit. So well done to Regis Bris. So he is at 2 in both of our lists, which I can only assume means that our number 1 is the same, because if you've left this guy out of your top 5 and all of your honourable mentions, then we will be shutting down the podcast. Who is it, Doogie?
It is Igor Tudor. No, it is Keith Andrews. It's Keith Andrews. I expect yours is too. You know, you got to take yourself back to August. Brentford had appointed a manager to take over from a guy who'd been in charge since October 2018. They turned to their set-piece coach, who had experience as an assistant manager, but he'd never been in charge of a senior game at any club for any country. And last summer, they lost Mbumo, they lost Wissa, they lost Norgard, they lost Flecken, which wasn't such a big loss, I wouldn't necessarily say, but they started to change their goalkeeper. They lost Ben Mee as well. So that's 4 of their 7 most used players. Mbumo had scored 20 league goals last year. Wissa had scored 19 league goals last year. How long ago does that feel? And as it stands right now, they are 8th. They are level on points with Chelsea, despite drawing their last 5. So there has actually even been a slight drop-off in terms of wins as well. But their big performances have come in the biggest games as well. They have been so impressive. They've beaten Villa home and away, Man United, Liverpool, Newcastle home and away, Bournemouth and Everton, and they still have to play City, United and Liverpool. So potentially quite a tough run in. But what a phenomenal season. Cast your minds back to August. I had them in the relegation zone. I'm sure you probably did. If you're listening to this, watching this as well, so many people had them 20th. And I think really underestimated the quality that was still in that squad, but also the work that Keith Andrews could do. And we didn't know how good Igor Thiago was going to be because he was injured for the entirety of last year, pretty much up until sort of April, May time. And to get a player like that to score 21 league goals so far has been absolutely massive. And Sharda's chipped in with 7, Ouattara with 5. But aside from that, it's really been Igor Thiago up front and Mikel Damsgaard in midfield, who I think's had a brilliant campaign as well. And they deserve to be there. On the basis of their underlying numbers, they are 6th for XG created. They are 7th for XG against. They're 6th by expected points. I think they have been absolutely phenomenal this year. And as I said at the start of the podcast, I want to see the award go to the manager that has overachieved the most, given expectations, the reality of their squad, transfer business, the mood of the club going into this season. And for me, there's actually quite a considerable gap between Keith Andrews and Regis Bris. I think he's been by far and away the best candidate.
Yeah, so in a season where basically your prospective title winner hasn't exactly run away with it and certainly hasn't convinced the masses, pulled up any trees, or let's just put it more simply, set records. If Guardiola's City get 100 points, fine, you're the manager of the season. You got 100 points. Christ, you deserve it. But in absence of all of that, and that's certainly the case in this situation, then I look again, same as you, I look at someone who is vastly overachieving according to resource or scenario. And for Brentford, it's actually both, because they're not huge spenders. They're smart spenders. Their wage bill isn't particularly high. And those circumstances, just to hammer home, to lose Brian Mbeumo, Johan Wissa, Christian Norgard and Thomas Frank in the space of a 6-week period over the summer and just be like, it doesn't matter because we're going to perform better than ever, is absolutely insane.
It would break most clubs. Amazing.
It really would. And it probably should have broken Brentford. And also just like their responsive business in the summer. So they were losing these players. And, in response to losing Brian Mbeumo, they went out and they spent 40 odd million on Dango Ouattara. And I was like, that's not good. Like they weren't exactly screaming, don't worry guys, we've got it all under control because Dango Ouattara is coming in for full. I was like, that's not a good use of money. Now, he hasn't been amazing. However, it hasn't really mattered. Nothing about Brentford's season has relied upon Dango Ouattara replacing Brian Mbeumo well, because Keith Andrews has, I'm going to say, somehow done a great job. He wasn't a manager. Like, I have no idea. The only thing I know about Keith Andrews is he missed a ton of chances during the Euros for Ireland once, and in a game against Italy maybe. And he was on the sofa doing championship punditry
with Liam Rossigna.
Years with Liam Rossigna. One of those two has turned out to be a really good manager in the Premier League this season. The other one, not so much. So I just thought the circumstances that Brentford were facing heading into the season were effectively terminal. I just thought a team with that budget is just not going to be able to overcome this. That's completely wrong. So in ranking Keith Andrews number 1, I'm effectively apologising to him and admitting that I was not familiar with his game and I had no idea Igor Thiago was this good, and that is a big part of this too. But a massive well done to him. So yeah, I had the 18th in my prediction pre-season. I had Burnley going down in rock bottom 20th, and I had Wolves and Brentford. I thought, everyone was talking about, could it be West Ham? Could it be Brentford? People were weighing these up, and yeah, I went for Brentford. Never mind. I'm reliably informed that producer Jack Collins had Brentford comfortably mid-table.
I did, because I think that if you've paid any attention to what Brentford have done over the last sort of 10 odd years, maybe more, they have lost managers, to clubs who are bigger than them. Those managers have gone on to actually really struggle. They've brought in managers who not have no background in the game, but who have, typically either had different jobs in the game or of kind of taking on their first or at least kind of early on in their managerial career. And when they lose their managers, they just replace them. And, when they've lost strikers in particular over the last number of years, whether that be Ollie Watkins or Ivan Toney, or you can go back all the way back to Andre Gray, for example, they've just replaced them by bringing in different replacements from interesting places because the entire system works. You can do this with the managers, right? Uwe Rosler in the early 2010s, right, came in. They lost him to, I think it might have been Wigan. And then they went and appointed Mark Warburton, who had almost no experience in managing a team. He went off to Rangers. They made a very, very rare mistake and they brought in Marinus Dijkhuizen, who lasted about 3 months. Then they bring in Dean Smith, who was managing Walsall at the time. He goes off to Aston Villa, his boyhood club. Fair enough. They replace him with Thomas Frank, who'd had minor stints managing at first team level. He does a brilliant job for the best part of 7 years. He leaves for Spurs. He struggles at Spurs, and they replace him with Keith Andrews, who's part of the system. This is what they do. And this shouldn't take away from what Keith Andrews has done, right? Like, he's in my top 2 as well. I actually have them the other way around in terms of where it's at. I think that
love it, Jack. Love it.
A promoted side coming up, and yes, spending money, fine, but a promoted side coming up, and you look at the travails that promoted sides have had in the last couple of years, to go and have the season that Sunderland have had, where you effectively hit every single goal you possibly had. It was survive relegation. And then what's the next big thing on the list? Oh, we'd love to win the derby at home against Newcastle. What's the next big thing on the list? We'd love to win the derby away at St. James's Park. You hit every single high note that you could possibly hit. You're comfortable by December. You don't fall off in the way that many expect you to during AFCON. You bring through a number of really talented players. None of this is to take away what Keith Andrews has done. Look, I'm talking about, hopefully a future Republic of Ireland manager here. So this isn't an anti-Brentford slant at all. In fact, it's a praise of the way that they run the club. And it doesn't mean that he shouldn't be in these conversations. He absolutely should. What he's achieved has been incredible. But I think that the structure and the system there at Brentford is there in a way to cushion you in a way that almost no other club is set up. And I think that him coming in there, having a rapport, a relationship with the players, the bit about Igor Thiago that I think is perhaps the most interesting is things that he's done before he's the manager. Last year, when it was set pieces, making sure that Igor Thiago, recovering from an injury, was always involved with those training sessions and making sure that he understood what was going on and felt part of the group. I don't think it's any shock that he's hit the ground running under Keith Andrews, in that he was the person that effectively stood up to look after him last season when he was out for the entire campaign. I just think that when you put these two things in context, they are both incredible achievements. I don't think there's much to split them, and both should be given absolute due praise. But I think that, as someone who genuinely did have Brentford in comfortable mid-table because of the way that they operate, what Regis Bris has done, and I had Sunderland flirting with the relegation zone when I did my preseason predictions, their kind of achievement over the top of it has been perhaps more impressive for me. And I think I would put that more down to the manager than what I would do at Brentford, because their system is so good.
Sure, yeah, it's the nature of a personal ranking, I guess. In that sense, achieving above expectations is always subjective, because you might have really high or really low expectations compared to me, Doogie, of one person or another. And for me, I was very aware of Brentford being a super well-oiled machine. I just thought that the list of people that they had lost, it wasn't just one player, it wasn't just two players, it was like the captain, the best player and the top goal scorer and the manager. I thought, surely that's too much. Surely that is too much in one summer. And I was wrong. Even Brentford can recover from something like that. It's absolutely incredible. But we've got Jack's top 2 there, which is the same as ours, but the other way around. It's nice that everybody is singing in harmony here. We all appreciate an underdog. We all appreciate achieving above expectations, and we all appreciate people who make the most of limited resources. And in a campaign where, I guess in the end, City and Arsenal, they're going to go head to head over the course of a handful of games, and they're going to have to try and outscore each other. And it is going to be quite thrilling. And if it does turn into, a 3-0 fest here, and these two teams really start piling on the pressure on each other, yeah, recency bias is going to kick in. And I think a lot of people are going to be saying, well, whoever comes out of this gauntlet has got to be manager of the season. But I'm glad that we can keep sight of those that have achieved genuinely fantastic things in very difficult circumstances over the course of the first 33 weeks, which is the majority of the season.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Doogie, your only mistake there, I think, probably just underrating Unai Emery a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Maybe he should have been a bit higher. Maybe I was also too generous to the two title contenders. It's interesting thinking back to 13-14, which is the last year, or sorry, one of the last years a non-title contender. Well, Palace just definitely weren't anywhere near it. You know, got amongst the manager of the year candidates. And 13-14 was that three-way title race between Liverpool, Man City and Chelsea. All three sides probably quite flawed. Liverpool, the most entertaining of that side with Sturridge and Suarez and Sterling, etc. But in the end, it went to a kind of plucky underdog who had overachieved against expectations. Whether we've become so focused on the title race every year in this country, even more so in the last 12 years, maybe that just means that it is inevitable that it will go to one of Guardiola or Arteta, whoever wins it. But I'm glad that we, as you say, looked beyond just who's going to be lifting that trophy with either red or light blue ribbons on in May, and gave some credit to some managers that have just done outstanding work this year.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. That's us wrapped up for the week. Let's see what happens this weekend in the Premier League. Let's see if anyone wins 3-0 and changes all of our minds about who should be manager of the year. Maybe Liam Rosenior will make his way into Doogie's top 22 with a win.
Absolutely not. He's below Thomas Frank as it stands.
Oh, really? No, he can't.
No, I'm only joking. I'm joking.
Where, you know what? When I was putting my long list together, and I did text Doogie yesterday and was like, I'm not convinced there's like 5 absolute bona fide candidates here. Enzo Maresca's looking pretty good right now.
Not too bad at all.
Just in like a comparative metric for against Liam Rosenior, what Maresca managed to keep a lid on is starting to look a bit better. Not saying he's part of this conversation. There have been some
almost iconically bad, managerial stints this season alone. We had Igor Tudor, we had Ange Postecoglou at Forest. And now Liam Rosenior's is completely going up in smoke at Chelsea. I'm not saying it's quite as bad as those other two, but there has been some real contrasting fortunes for a lot of managers this year.
It really has. The spin-off pod Worst Manager of the Year is also hotly contested between 3 viable candidates, but we won't touch that one. Okay, time to say goodbye. Doogie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Sam.
Jack, thanks for presiding.
Thank you, Sam. Always a pleasure. That was fun.
Nice one. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you same time next week.